The night was thick with an eerie stillness, the kind that settled deep in the bones and whispered warnings to the soul. Evelyn Mathers stood before the wrought iron gates of Blackwood Estate, her gloved fingers tightening around the handle of her flashlight. The estate loomed beyond the bars, an ancient structure swallowed by creeping ivy and shadow. It was said to be cursed, a house where time stood still and the dead refused to rest. The stories had been passed down for generations. Whispers of a woman in black who watched from the windows, of visitors who entered and never returned, of a voice in the dark that called to the living. Evelyn had spent years chasing ghosts, debunking urban legends, peeling back the layers of fear to reveal the mundane. But Blackwood Estate was different. The town refused to acknowledge its existence. Maps omitted its location, and those who dared to speak of it did so in hushed tones, as if afraid something might hear. Yet here she was, standing at its threshold, the air heavy with the scent of rain and decay. She hesitated, feeling a deep-rooted instinct to turn back, to leave whatever lingered in that house undisturbed. But logic was a stubborn thing, and curiosity dangerous. With a deep breath, she pushed the gate open. It groaned like something waking from a deep slumber. The path to the house was lined with dead trees, their skeletal branches reaching toward the sky as if in silent prayer. The crunch of her boots on the gravel felt deafening in the oppressive silence. The house itself loomed ahead, a monstrous thing with blackened windows and a roof that sagged like tired shoulders. As she stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaked beneath her weight. The front door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking through the crack. It was an invitation, or a warning. Evelyn exhaled and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of something foul, something rotting. Her flashlight flickered, struggling against the suffocating darkness. The grand foyer stretched before her, its chandeliers hanging like dead things, their crystals dulled by time. A staircase curled upward, its banister wrapped in cobwebs, leading to a second floor swallowed in shadows. The house was too quiet. The silence pressed against her ears, humming like something alive. Then, movement. A whisper, so faint it barely brushed against the air. She turned sharply, her flashlight beam slicing through the dark. Nothing. Just the heavy drapes swaying gently as if someone had just passed through them. She forced herself forward, moving deeper into the house. The furniture was draped in sheets, frozen in time, untouched. But then she noticed something odd. In the layer of dust covering the floor, there were footprints, not her own. Fresh. Leading toward the parlor, Evelyn followed. The door was ajar, revealing a grand room bathed in shadows. A fireplace stood against the far wall, long dead, its mantel lined with cracked porcelain figurines. A grand piano sat in the center, untouched, its lid slightly open, as if someone had been playing and left in a hurry. But what caught her attention was the mirror. It was massive, standing taller than her, framed in elaborate gold that had long since dulled. Unlike everything else in the house, the glass was spotless, reflecting her image with unsettling clarity. Too much clarity. Her reflection was stiff, her posture slightly off, her eyes darker than they should have been. Then her reflection moved, but she hadn't. A cold chill crawled up her spine. The reflection tilted its head, slow and unnatural, a jagged movement that sent every alarm in her body screaming. Her breath came shallow, her fingers tightening around the flashlight. The reflection's mouth began to move, forming words, silent, lost behind the barrier of glass. Then the whispering returned. It wasn't just one voice, it was many. The mirror trembled. The glass rippled, bulging outward as if something was trying to push through. A single crack split the surface, then another and another. Evelyn staggered back as the mirror exploded outward, shards flying in every direction. A deafening shriek filled the room, something inhuman, something wrong. The pieces hit the floor, but the mirror wasn't empty. It was a doorway, and something was stepping through. A figure, draped in black, emerged from the fractured reflection, its form blurred and shifting like smoke caught in the wind. Evelyn couldn't move, her body frozen in terror. The figure's face was obscured, but its presence was suffocating, a pressure against her chest that made it hard to breathe. It raised a hand, long fingers stretching toward her. A single word escaped its lips, a voice like brittle leaves rustling in the wind. Stay. Evelyn bolted. She stumbled out of the parlor, the house roaring to life around her. Doors slammed shut, the whispering rising into a deafening wail. The walls seemed to pulse, the air thick with unseen hands grasping at her. She reached the staircase, her foot barely touching the first step before the ground trembled beneath her, a cold grip wrapped around her ankle. She screamed. Fingers, dozens of them, pale and writhing, emerged from the darkness beneath the stairs, clawing at her legs, her arms, her throat. She kicked, twisted, her flashlight clattering to the ground. The house groaned, a guttural sound like something waking from a long, deep slumber. And then she saw them, faces, hollow-eyed, twisted in agony, pressed against the walls, emerging from the wood itself, watching, reaching, trapped. A woman's voice, soft yet mournful, whispered against her ear. "You should not have come." Evelyn's scream was swallowed by the house. And then, silence. Evelyn's world was swallowed in darkness, cold, suffocating, endless. She didn't remember falling, only the sensation of being pulled, of unseen hands dragging her into a place that shouldn't exist. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something worse, something rotten. Her body felt weightless, suspended in the void. And then pain. She hit the floor hard, the breath forced from her lungs. Wood groaned beneath her, like the sound echoing unnaturally. A soft, flickering light illuminated the space, casting long, jagged shadows along the walls. Evelyn forced herself up, her limbs trembling. She was no longer in the house, at least not the same house she had entered. The room around her was twisted, wrong. The furniture stood at impossible angles. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting in and out as if the house itself were alive. And then there was the mirror. It stood at the far end of the room, whole again, its surface swirling like disturbed water. It no longer reflected the room she was in. Instead, it showed something else, something worse. A woman in black stood within the glass, her face obscured by a tattered veil. She did not move, did not breathe, but Evelyn could feel her watching. A whisper curled through the air, slithering into her ears. "You are mine now." The voice was not human. It was ancient, broken, stitched together from the echoes of the dead. The woman in the mirror took a step forward, her form shifting unnaturally, as if reality itself rejected her presence. The walls trembled. The whispering grew. Evelyn's instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The door behind her had vanished, replaced by an endless stretch of shadow. The only way out was through the mirror. Her pulse pounded in her skull. She had to act fast. Reaching for the flashlight still clutched in her shaking hand, she aimed it at the mirror. The beam flickered, weak, but it was enough to cause the woman's form to distort. She hissed, a sound like rust scraping against bone. The whispering voices turned into wails, furious, hungry. The room shook violently, the floorboards splitting open. Evelyn knew she had only seconds. She lunged forward, raising the flashlight like a weapon. With everything she had left, she hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered. The moment it broke, a deafening shriek filled the room, the walls convulsing like a dying thing. A force slammed into her chest, knocking her backward. She hit the ground hard, pain flaring through her ribs. But the mirror, its fragments no longer reflected the woman in black. Instead, they showed something else. Her apartment, her real world, a way out. She didn't hesitate. Crawling forward, she reached for the largest shard, its jagged edges glowing with an unnatural light. The moment her fingers touched it, a cold, skeletal hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing her wrist. Evelyn gasped, yanking herself free, just as more hands emerged from the shadows, clawing, grasping. The woman in black screamed, a sound so unholy it made Evelyn's vision blur. But she was already moving, diving into the reflection. The world tilted. The whispers became distant. And then, silence. Evelyn awoke with a jolt. She was on the floor of her apartment, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights outside. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She gasped for air, her body drenched in sweat. It took several seconds before she realized she was home. No twisted walls, no whispers, no woman in black, but something was wrong. The air was cold, too cold. Slowly, she turned her head toward the mirror on the opposite wall. The glass was cracked, and in its fractured reflection, deep in the shadows, something moved. A whisper, barely audible, crawled through the room. "You brought me with you." The light bulb overhead flickered. The whispering returned, and Evelyn understood she had never truly escaped. The house was inside her now,